Alright, this is going to be a quick little video just how to put our stuff into After Effects. So the end process of this is that we have an image all done. I'm going to drop it into the After Effects window. And it's going to take some few seconds to load. We're using After Effects even though this is a still because After Effects has some tools in it that programs like Photoshop do not. Okay, just so you can see that. I'm going to do the same thing inside of Photoshop. Just drop it like it's hot. This is going to say, do you want to use transparency or alpha channel? I'm going to say alpha channel. And we get our image. Okay, so this is the image that rendered out. Here's the alpha channel. It was solid, so there wasn't anything there. And this is pretty much it. There's nothing else kind of hidden inside here, even though there is stuff hidden inside here. It's not showing us the stuff that's hidden. Okay, so yeah, there's nothing else here. It's just empty. All right, so I'm going to close that. I'm going to go back to After Effects, and I'm going to drop this into my new window. And this makes a new composition, fits it perfectly. That's the best way to do it. So what I need to do is, if we look at the original image, you see it says floating point plus pre-multiplied zip compression linear light. So this is basically, it's a higher resolution image, not just, you know, width and height, but actually depth. There's a lot of stuff hidden inside here that we just can't see right now. So I'm going to go to Effect. Oops. Click on it. I'm going to go to Effect. I'm going to go to 3D Channel, and I'm going to say Extractor. And what this does, it helps us pull out these channels that are hidden inside here. So if I click on this and I choose Ambient Occlusion, there we go. You'll see that I get an ambient occlusion pass. Okay, so I could adjust this further also if I needed to. Oops, this is like crazy sensitive. Might be better if I just open that up. Yep, went just too far. Come on, baby. There we go. Alright, so you can see how I can adjust the coloration of that and leave it at 1. I typically don't like to use this. I'd just like to use another channel inside here to do, you know, the next thing. Alright, so I'm going to go back to my project, and I'm going to drop down another copy of this. So I have on the very top, I have my ambient occlusion, and on the bottom I have just my image. Okay, so I'm going to take my ambient occlusion, and I need to change this mode to multiply. Now if you don't see your mode here, you'll have to use the toggle switches in modes, and that will show you the modes. So once I multiply, it's going to take this ambient occlusion image and multiply it, so I get deeper shadows. Pretty awesome. I'm going to hit T, and I can adjust the opacity of that. So if I want to choose how that ambient occlusion is mixing into it, I can do that as well. I could also drop on top of this a levels or a curves, and I could adjust it that way too. So here I'm darkening my darks. Here I'm lightening my lights. So if I want to kind of sharpen where this is happening a bit more, I can do that. Okay, if I turn off the curves, you can see it's kind of more spread out. Alright, so lots of stuff that we can do with this to adjust it after we've gotten that. Alright, so that's the first part. So I got my extractor on here, I got my curves on here on this top one. Just so I don't get confused, I'm going to hit enter and then rename this to AO. I'll also rename the bottom one to color. Alright, so now what I need to do is, this is basically crystal clear. Like if I look at the edges, it's pretty clear how the edges look. But I want this to have a little bit of softness to it. So like this front item, let's say this is in focus, and then the back items are just not blurry crazy, but just like softer. Okay. So I'm going to drop down another copy of this. And you'll see that it looks like the ambient occlusion went away. It didn't, just covering it up. And I'm just going to rename this one to be depth. I'm going to add the 3D channel, add the extractor to it. And on this, important thing to note too, when I put the extractor on here, it just extracts the RGB data, so we actually get like the truer value. Like this is what we look like inside of Maya when we rendered. It wasn't that bright, so on my final image I will like adjust my colors and stuff. There we go. So I'm going to extract the depth. Now you'll see when I go to depth here that it doesn't do anything to the RGB, where when I did it to the AO, it automatically fills it in. Okay, because the depth is just one channel, it doesn't know where we want it to go. So I'm just going to change each one of these to depth. Yeah, you can leave alpha as copy and then hit OK. Alright, so now this looks like it's completely white. And if you look over here while I move my mouse in the window, you'll see that there's no change. It says 255, 255, 255. So what this should do is it should read how far our items are from the camera, and it's not really doing that. The reason it doesn't is because of this. This is an 8 bpk, which means bits per pixel, or bits per color depth, something. So I need to change that. So I'm going to click on it, bits per channel. That's what I meant to say. So I'm going to change this to 32-bit, because that's what we're dealing with. That's the kind of image that we brought in. It's a 32-bit image. And if I change that, I could also tell I can also tell After Effects that I'm working with sRGB and to linearize my workspace. And what that should do, there we go. Just get a bit of a softer image on there. Alright, so now as I move my mouse over this, now if we look at these numbers, you can see how they're now actually changing to how far those items or those points are from the camera. So just so we can see this a little bit clearer, I'm going to go to my color correction and go to gamma. Where are you at, Gammy? Oops. I don't want that. Gamma. Exposure. I'll take exposure. Or 300 Bob. Alright, so what I'm trying to do is just play with my gamma to get that to show up. So that's not showing anything. Let me pull my exposure down just so you can see it. That's all I want to do is just see what this is looking like. It's still thinking. That's why it's taking so long. There we go. Alright. So playing with the offset, I was able to get it. I reset that to 0 and just keep playing with the offset. Pull that down too. Alright, so you can see that the items are actually there, and it is registering some sort of depth inside the scene. I'm just going to put that back to 1. Pull that up a little bit. I'm going to play with this a little bit just to get it maybe about here. There we go. Something like that. So you can still see those items in the background. Okay. So now this item being darker is darker because it's closer to our frame. These items being lighter are lighter because they're further away from the frame. Alright, so I'm going to leave this exposure on here. That'll come in handy in a second. And what I need to do is I need to use this depth on both of these channels. Okay, so I want to blur out my AO and blur out the color. I could do those separately, but it's very difficult to work with. So what I'm going to do is right click, and I'm going to pre-compose both of those. So I grab both, right click, pre-compose. Make sure it says move, and I'm going to just say flat coloring. And so now we have this flat coloring one, and we have a depth. Okay, so nothing's really changed. We have the exact same look, except I have a new composition. So now I can go to that flat coloring, go to effect, go to blur, and go to camera lens blur. And what I can do is say, here's where it's going to choose what's blurred, or what chooses what gets blurred. Is I'm going to use the depth as my blurring layer. So it's actually going to read this color information, and based on this number, it'll choose what's in focus. So I'm just going to turn that off so you don't need to see it. And I'm going to pull my blurriness up like a crazy amount. And then I can just play with this blur focal distance. Okay. Now it's going to flicker a little bit. There we go. And if I use the FX button here, I can turn it off, turn it back on, and we can see the difference. So sometimes you have to zoom in to actually see that difference. So at 0.26, that's what's in focus. So it's probably something around here that's in focus. So if I change this to 0.1, and we wait, something further back is in focus. 0.75, 1. And move this down so you can see it. Point. Alright, so I'm going to go back to my depth here, and I'm going to adjust my exposure. And I can turn the exposure off too and just see, you know, what are the results of that. Yep, go back to this. So I basically reset my exposure. That's in focus there. And it might just be taking its time to update. I just deleted the exposure. I'm not sure why this time it's not playing as nice as it was before. There we go. Now it seems to be playing nicer now. And I think I do have this blur radius up a bit too high, so let's go 100 for now. I'm going to zoom in on this edge, because I want this edge to be pretty crisp. So you'll find just that sweet spot where that edge is in focus. Right there. Okay, so now that's in focus, and then this is all fuzzy. Now let me go back to my flat coloring, so I'm going to double click it. I'm going to go to my color, and I'm just going to put that extractor on it just to bring it into a better color range. Back to this. I'm going to purge my stuff. It's just behaving a little bit weird, so I'm going to say purge all memory. Alright, so that should be good there. Okay, so now what I can do is I can adjust this. So right now you can see the blurriness on there is way too much, so I'm just going to crank this down to like 20. I don't want a crazy amount of blur, I just want to have some indication of softness, and you can definitely see in the back how we're just softening that just a hair, and that's going to help pull it off a little bit nicer. We can also adjust the highlight, so if I pull this gain up, that's going to sharpen this highlight here. Okay, I can also play with the threshold. Maybe I want to control, you know, more highlight, less highlight is affected. So you can really play with these kinds of things. I'm going to say repeat edge pixels too. Sometimes on these blurs we get these weird edges. like that. You can see where it's like completely white. So I'm going to say repeat. That way it doesn't have that white edge. Alright, so now we can adjust some colors. So I'm going to go back to my flat coloring. And inside here, I'm going to drop in another instance of my image. There we go. And I'm going to take this, I'm going to go to the extractor. I'm going to click on it. And remember, we have these other layers. We have the matte Mila small jar, big can, and little can. So I'm going to attach each one of these. So I'm going to say the small jar is going to go to the B. The big can is going to go to the G. And the little can is going to go to the R. So BGR, blue, green, red. There we go. So now if we look at that, you can see we get one red, one green, one blue. And what I can do with this is I can adjust my coloring. So I'm just going to move this down to the bottom so I don't see it. I'm going to go to my color. I'm going to go to Effect. And let's say I go to Color Correction and I want to adjust the color on one of these things. So I'm going to say Change Color. And what we're going to see is as I adjust my coloring on here, oops. Yeah, that's fine. Just let me know, because I'm working in 32-bit, that it's may not be accurate. All right, now because this is so white/gray, it's not giving me a whole lot to work with. Let me go to a different one. Let's go to Color Correction, and maybe I'll use Tint on this one. So the black values, I'll match them to that color there, but darker. And the white values, we'll mark it to that color there, but saturated. All right, so now we get this kind of greenish tint to our stuff. Now I only want this to happen on one of these items here. Okay, not all of them, just one. So what I can do is, on this color, I can go to my matte. So I go to Channels and I say Set Matte. And what this is going to do is it's going to use the color information from this other channel. Let me rename this to be Masks. So I'm going to say take the layer from Masks and use the red channel. Okay, so what it's doing now, let me turn my masks off, is turn my AO off too, just so we can see this. Is it's adjusting this. It's setting this up to be a mask. There we go. But because I did it after the fact, it's acting kind of weird. So I'm just going to pull this above the tint and multiply matte layer. What I should be doing is cutting it out. It doesn't seem to be cutting it out. Masks. It may want me to pre-compose this masks layer. Masks. I'll say move all attributes. There we go. Okay, that's what I wanted. And this is just a common thing that sometimes they want you to just, pre-compose stuff. So I've pre-composed this, so now that's just the one item. So I have this color, I have this tint, and I can control how much of this is getting tinted. So I make this purple, and I make this blue, and you can see how I have this ability to adjust that color. Now I've lost everything else in my scene. That's no big deal, because I can just duplicate this and then set the matte to something else. So I can set it to the green channel, and now I bring that one back. I can duplicate this again, set this one to the blue channel, and I bring that one back. I can duplicate it again. I'll put this one on the bottom, and I will set this to none. Actually, I can just delete the matte. There we go. Okay. And now I can just pull this down. So basically what I have is control over each one of these items. Okay, so if I go to this one and I say I want this one to be this color, so I'm going to make this a dark blue like that. I'm going to map the white to a brighter version of that blue. So you can see how I've tinted this one to be this kind of bluey one. Small back jar. Okay, and I'll go to color 2, which is the middle one. And I'll do the same thing, just different colors, just so you can see it. You don't have to do this part, but I just want you to be have this on your radar as one of the goodies that we can play with. There we go. And then finally that one. And we'll put this one in the red zone. Alright, so I've adjusted the colors on each one of these things individually. It's thinking. So this is a great way to be able to customize our stuff. If we had a car or a product or whatever that we rendered out and we wanted to tweak individual settings, we can tweak individual settings by doing a bunch of masks. Alright, we're unfrozen. Now the bottom one I can adjust too. So the bottom one I can just to show it off. Just make this green. Make that green. Oops. Oops, I have the amount of tint as 0. There we go. So now you can see I can play with the background color. I can play with the small jar, this jar, that jar. I can even eliminate the background. And I can add my own layer in here. And then maybe add a generate ramp gradient. I don't want a 4-color gradient. Gradient ramp, there it is. Okay, now we did lose our shadows, but once I put the AO back on, it'll look like we have some sort of shadow there, which again is a nice feature of having the AO. And this way I can really pick exactly what color I want. So if I wanted this to have a darker background, like that, I could have a darker background just like that. And I'll do a little scatter in here just to kind of blend it up. Sometimes gradients don't behave very well, so you just add a little scattering in it. That seems to help. Okay, so there's my gradient. I've replaced the background. I've replaced everything else. I go back to this image here. It thinks for a second because now we've updated stuff. There we go. So there's our final image. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my composition, and I'm just going to say save frame as file. And for now I'm just storing this on my desktop, so I'm just going to label this Sarcona product render, and I'll save it as a TIFF. Right here it's going to say PSD, that's fine. Because I can go to my Photoshop settings here, click on the word, come on baby, and choose TIFF. And everything else should be good. We don't really need an alpha, so I'll just say RGB. Everything else should be good. And I'll just hit render. And it's going to go through and it's just going to render out that frame. And now that's done. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to go over is how to turn your stuff in. So this is not our project, but this is a very similar project. very similar items. So what we want to do is not just like turn it in the way it is. We want to go through and clean our stuff up, stuff that we need, stuff that we don't need. So inside of my outliner, so I went to Window, Outliner. I have some stuff I don't need in here, like some curves I used. I can delete those. I have a group, but the group isn't named. So I'm just going to double click the group and call this can. I have a plane. This is my background. I have my lights. So this is my fill light. This is my key light. I have a helix, which is my foam. I have a plane. Oops, there we go. This is just like the sphere that we use to bounce some light into it. So I'm just calling this my bounce card. I have another group, which is my sign. I have some sign holders. I'm just going to drag these into the sign group. So I'm just going to middle drag and drop it into sign. There we go. Alright, so now all the things in my outliner are named. The stuff inside the groups doesn't matter so much. I'm more worried about the stuff outside the groups, okay, or the groups themselves. Now I also want to make sure that my stuff is layered correctly. Oops. So over here I have layers. So if I turn these off, you can see how some of the items are on layers. I want everything on layers. So I'm going to grab my lights. I'm going to click on the far right button over here and say lights. Grab these two items, drop them onto here, call this sign posts. There's my cream. And you typically don't need this many layers for your stuff, but it's good habit to get into. And then I have these, which are my environment items. All that. So now when I turn everything off, this is what I should get. And for this time, I'm actually going to go through, open up your scene file, and make sure I can turn everything off. Make sure all these are labeled. Also make sure that in your outliner, all those are labeled. Now we have one more spot under my hyper shade, which is that little ball right there. I'm going to click the ball, which I did. Now I'm just waiting. We have a bunch of stuff in here that may or may not be labeled. Okay, so I'm going to just slide this over to my other monitor for a second, turn all this stuff back on. There we go. Oops, I have a wood sign here, which is a different one. So now I need to know what these things are. So I have a cap, obviously that's called a cap. I have a Gillette can, which is that. If I hit 6, you can see the Gillette can label. I have Lambert 1. That one's default. We just leave that alone. Just don't touch that one. But then I have this other one. I don't know what that is. So I'm going to right click and say select objects with material. And it selects the foam. So I know then that this one should be called foam shader. I have red sphere. I don't know what that is. Let's select it. Nope, nothing's in the scene. So this one's probably not even being used. So it, let's say we had 50 in here that we're not using. I'm not using a surface shader 1 here also. If I go to edit, I can delete anything that's unused. That way I don't have to kind of hunt for things I'm not even using in my scene. That's always good. We have a particle cloud. We leave this one alone also. Okay. We have a rope. That's my rope. Shader glow. We leave that alone. Here's another surface shader. This might be on something that's hidden. Or it's actually that. There it is. Alright. We have a white backdrop. Another white backdrop. White sign. Wood sign. Okay. So I've made sure that everything is labeled. Right click. Oops. And select the objects to figure out what it is. And then you can label it accordingly. Alright. So I've labeled everything in my scene. Everything's awesome. I'm going to save it. And I'm going to save this as Sarcona Product Final. It goes into my scenes folder. My project's been set this whole time. Everything is glorious. Alright, so I can close Maya down. It's thinking about it. Alright, so here we go. I'm going to copy this folder. This is just called 2520. So I'm just going to copy it to my desktop. You can just copy it to some place that's, you know, not where you currently have it. And we're going to delete everything in here that is not important to this assignment. Okay, so I don't need everything that's inside the folder. So we've talked about this before. I don't need all of these folders: assets, autosave, cache, clips, and data. So those can be deleted. There's no movie in this case. We just have a still. I don't need particles, don't need render data, so I can delete those. I don't need scripts, I don't need sound, delete those. Now in my scenes folder, you'll see that I have several scenes inside here. The only one that I need is the very last one. Sarcona, product final, MA, or MB. Under source images, I should have all the source images inside here. I can leave those. Under images, I shouldn't need any of these images, so I'm going to delete all the images in here and put my one image inside there. So this is the one we rendered out of After Effects. I put that one in there. So this folder here, once I relabel it, there we go. This folder here is the one that I'm going to turn in to the Z drive. All right, so there we go. That's how you finish up this project.